It's time for Ask Dr. Rick on 590 The Fan KFNS, presented by Bellman Buick GMC. This hour is dedicated to sports medicine, injury prevention, and the issues that are tackled daily with injuries in sports. Now, let's hear from the hosts, Dr. Rick Lehman and Dan McLaughlin of Fox Sports Midwest.
Welcome to another edition of Ask Dr. Rick on 590 The Fan KFNS. Ask Dr. Rick is brought to you by Bellman Buick GMC, located off I-270 and McDonald Boulevard. I'm Dan McLaughlin of Fox Sports Midwest. I'm coming to you from beautiful, sunny, warm Jupiter, Florida. Of course, this is the spring training home of the St. Louis Cardinals, and this is the annual Cardinals Fantasy Camp. You may have heard Baseball Fridays yesterday, and we had a number of Cardinal players on to talk about the passing of Stan the Man and also about Fantasy Camp here. If you'd like to ask Dr. Rick Lehman a medical question, the best way to do that is to like him on Facebook. Just go to his Facebook, and it's facebook.com. Ask Dr. Rick Lehman. Again, you can follow him on Twitter and facebook.com/Ask Dr. Rick Lehman. You can see his blogs and his past audio from previous shows, as well as the new advancements in the sports medical field. So let's welcome in Dr. Rick Lehman to the conversation. Doc, good afternoon.
How's it down there in Florida?
Well, it's sunny, it's warm, so I'm saying I'm having a little better week than you.
No doubt.
Now, you know a little thing or two about Miami because you're a tennis player. You went to college down here. So I have to ask you, before we jump into some of the medical stuff and the questions that we've gotten on Facebook and what you've been tweeting out, but why did you leave Miami?
You know, I ask myself that question virtually every day. I went to medical school down in Miami. I grew up in Miami and played tennis in Miami and basically did my training at Washington University at Barnes Hospital. And after being in St. Louis for 5 years, I then did a year in Philadelphia, took care of the Flyers, and I really like St. Louis. I mean, after spending 5 years here, it almost seemed like home, and really there wasn't a whole lot back in Miami other than my family, but really no connections, and I really took to St. Louis. So after my residency, I said, I really like this place. I'm going to stay in St. Louis. And although I get back down to Miami quite a bit because of our hockey team, I got to tell you, St. Louis is a great place to live, and the weather may not be as good, but people are great, and it's really a lot to do. It's a great place.
Dr. Rick Lehman, by the way, is a co-owner, and he is the team doctor for the Florida Panthers. We'll talk hockey in just a moment. A lot to get into this week, Doc, and we'll talk baseball in our final segment. But let's jump into football. This will take center stage really from here on out until next Sunday. So you're about a week out, and from a doctor's point of view, you've got 2 weeks to get guys ready to play. How tough is that to get them ready? And I know that's a very general, basic question because all injuries are different in significance. But how quickly can you get guys close to 100% in the NFL after such a long season to get them ready to play at the highest level at the Super Bowl?
That's a great question. I think when you look at a football season, basically you're looking at 16 weeks, and you're looking at fatigue and breakdown every week. And most athletes, when they start the season, they're at their best, and at week 16, physically, from a doctor's standpoint of view, they're at their worst. So they're going to have attrition throughout the season. They're going to lose a little bit of weight. They're going to be deconditioned. They're going to be beat up a little bit. They're going to be sore. Then you've got playoffs, which are high intensity, and then basically you got the Super Bowl. Now, you got good and bad. You're going to have a week off. Then you're going to start preparation. So you're going to look at game film. You're going to do a little bit of light conditioning, a little bit of light running, but you're really not going to do much the first week, and everybody's going to rest. They're going to get their cortisone injections. They're going to be in the training room, etc., and they're going to get a little better. And in the NFL, getting a little better might just take you 2 days, where it might take you and me 6 weeks. We don't have 6 weeks, so we got to do everything in 2 or 3 days. And you might spend 6 hours a day in the training room or 4 hours a day in the training room getting ready. So the good is you've got that week off, and we spend an inordinate amount of time working those kids in that week. Lots and lots of therapy, lots and lots of supplements, good supplements, looking at their diet, bed rest, making sure they're sleeping, and really go through the whole program and really look at them in total. So that's the good part. The bad part is they've had 16 weeks of getting beat up. So they're coming in at a pretty low level. And that athlete says to you, Doc, I don't care what you got to do. Inject me, do whatever you got to do, I got to be prime time on Sunday. And we really spend an unbelievable amount of time working through that first week, getting them ready for some light practices, and then being ready on Sunday. And it is hard. You got to look at every individual injury and every individual athlete. It's a big difference taking care of a rookie than a Ray Lewis. And you got a lot of different components. So my back's sore, my hammy's tight, my ankle's swollen. So you got to look at every single one of those injuries. You got to treat every one of those injuries, and then you got to kind of build it back together, and you got to get them ready for Sunday.
In my lifetime, Doc, I've never seen a better defensive player than Ray Lewis. You mentioned you went to the University of Miami. He's a Miami product, and let's jump into a little bit with him. He, at the age of 37, is a modern miracle in many ways. He is playing at that level at an advanced age on a body I'm sure that's beat up. You wouldn't know it, though, and he's doing it right now with a torn tricep. Explain a torn tricep and trying to make a tackle or just play in the sport of football or any sport, much less football, and what he's able to do right now in the postseason, which is lead the league in tackles. That is an amazing story.
Well, I think it's more than amazing, and I don't think you'll ever see it happen again. First of all, most people that have a torn tricep, and I can only think of one or two others that ever came back at all, I'm talking about at all, are done. You tear your tricep, hasta luego. You call Deerbergs and you go get a job because you're just not going to play in the National Football League. So that's the first thing. And, he didn't play after he tore his tricep. And for our listeners, a tricep is that big muscle on or not on me, but on him, the big muscle on the back of your arm. So you got the bicep in the front, the triceps in the back. So when you have to push off, so that running back's coming, you're getting blocked, and you have to push off, that's all your tricep. Normally you either tear it in a game or you tear it in the weight room, and we see that probably 50-50, and your ability to push is gone. So here's a guy that tore his tricep, did not play after that, got an MRI, had a lot of swelling, actually had some loose bodies in his elbow and some other issues, and rested. And I believe that the Ravens felt, John Harbaugh felt, that he was not going to play ever again the rest of his life. That was the teaching. That's what he believed. Training staff told him. They did not play him the first round of the playoffs. They put him in a brace, and you can see it on TV. It looks very mechanical. And what it does is it locks his elbow in extension so he can push off with his shoulder. He still can't push off with his elbow, but he can push off with his shoulder. And he is so fast still at 37, and he's so positionally strong. He gets his body in the right position so quickly, he's making tackles. And that's a tribute to his speed and his strength. Now, the other way to look at this a little bit is he's now had X amount of weeks where he hasn't had to play, so he's not as beat up as everybody else is. So that's the upside. The downside is he's 37 years old, and like you said, it's a modern miracle.
Doc, when I watch him play, I see a train wreck on every play. He's dominating people. He hits so hard. He does it with veracity and speed, and there's a beauty to that in the sport of football. There's no question about it. However, I see this past week Junior Seau's family is saying, all right, I want to sue the NFL because of what's happened with Junior, and he committed suicide because of repeated concussions. I worry about, and I really do, I worry about these players that play so long. What are we going to see out of Ray Lewis at the age of 45, 50? And I know it's a very vague statement to make, but are we going to see another Junior Seau or a situation where a guy has got concussions and he doesn't even know it and he's playing through it? At the age of 37 to do what he's doing is remarkable. So what's going to be the after effects with a guy like Ray Lewis?
Well, first of all, I don't know that you're going to see Ray Lewis at 50. I would be very surprised if he lives past 52 or 53. This is math. It's not. I'm not predicting that. I'm just telling you, when you look at guys and you look at their longevity and you look at the injuries and you chart those, it does have an effect on your life expectancy. So, what's going to happen? Well, the first thing I think that's going to happen, which is going to happen to every NFL football player at some level, and we're talking about this cumulative trauma, encephalopathy, or central brain syndrome, or whatever you want to call it, dementia, NFL dementia, some people are calling it. But basically, you get hit in the head, you have a concussion, you lose brain cells, they die, and you go back and you play again, and you go through this over and over and over again. And when the brain is looked at And these can be college athletes. They can even be high school athletes who've had concussions. And this is really something that parents need to listen to. There is brain trauma and brain cell death across the board. Every NFL football player at some level, unless you're a kicker or somebody who's truly not having any contact. So, and a guy like Ray Lewis, who's played all these years, he played at the U, at a high level, played in the NFL at a high level. There's no question that if you look at his brain function, so you test him as a rookie and you test him 10 years out, you test him 20 years out, 30 years out, so his rookie year, his index year, that his brain function diminishes every 10 years. Now, will he kill himself? I can't answer that. Will he be the same person at 30 that he was at 20? No. And at 50, I think you're going to see somebody, maybe not as bad as a Joe Louis, you're going to see somebody who really can't mentate. And I've got a lot of patients like this that come in, they played NFL football, maybe they played 2 years, maybe they played 10 years. They have little cards, and it tells them how to get from their house to the 7-Eleven, how to get from their house to drop their kids off from school, and they can't remember how to get from their house, walk into the mailbox, back to their house. And this is just brain trauma. And there's no way, it doesn't matter how you get your brain trauma, the NHL, the NFL, you fall down the stairs, there's no way your brain can absorb that impact and be okay. Those cells die, and then they're dead.
It's amazing stuff. And Dr. Rick Lehman is with us. It's Ask Dr. Rick. Again, you can follow him on Twitter, or you can email him a question. Also on Facebook.com, Ask Dr. Rick Lehman, and that's spelled Lehman. Ask Dr. Rick Lehman on Facebook. Doctor, then, the question becomes, the NFL is really taking a hard look at concussions. What would be your advice to, if Roger Goodell said, hey, Rick Lehman, I want to sit down with you, let's go to lunch. I want you to help me curtail concussions. What would you tell him?
Well, I think the NFL has taken a big step. They're trying to stop head-to-head collisions. And initially, we did a study at the University of Pennsylvania, and it looked at blocking and tackling with the crown of your helmet. And this was a hallmark study. This was in the early 80s. No one was talking about it. And we really understood that, hey, you can't use your head as a battering ram. I think you have to try, if you can, to change some of the major rules in NFL football. How many steps you can take before blocking, how many steps you can take before tackling. And even though you do get penalized, or you should get penalized for a head-to-head collision, I was at the football game in Atlanta, and I can't tell you how many head-to-head collisions there are in a football game. Now, you can say, hey, the guy ducked, or this happened, or that happened, maybe it was unintentional. But that doesn't really matter, because your brain doesn't know intentional or unintentional, and you have to change the rules, or you have to do something to take off the helmets. Now, people say, take the helmets off, you won't have these terrible collisions, and that's correct, but you're going to change the game. So I don't think that's reasonable. I don't think making the helmets better is a good thing. I think that's a bad thing, but I think you have to change the rules so that when you're blocking and you're tackling, and for the runner, because it's not fair for the runner to put his head down and then, the backer can't tackle him and has to take the helmet to his shoulder. So you got to change the rules for the runners as well. But until you do that, you're not going to solve this problem. And we're just seeing the very tip of the iceberg. As a clinician, I see these guys come in the office. I talk to them. I ask them about their career, how many years you play, how many downs, etc. And you can see a direct correlation between how long they played and generally how they're mentating. So we're looking at the tip of this problem. We're seeing some suicides. We're seeing some different issues. But once this whole problem is laid out on the table, Roger Goodell and the NFL in total is going to have to make some major changes. Otherwise, it's never going to be any different, and you're going to see player after player end up like John Mackey, and you can go through the list.
We're visiting with Dr. Rick Lehman. This is his show, Ask Dr. Rick. I'm Dan McLaughlin of Fox Sports Midwest. And again, if you'd like to follow Dr. Rick on Facebook, facebook.com/Ask Dr. Rick Lehman. This is brought to you by our good friends at Bellman Buick GMC, located off of I-270 and McDonald Boulevard. When we come back, we'll talk about the first week of the NHL. We thought last week there might be some injuries, and we've seen a little bit of that. But we'll be back with more with Dr. Rick in just a moment.